Hi everyone, welcome to one of my sessions on powering AI capabilities with API management and OpenAI APIs. So my name is Babur. I'm super excited to be here to present at the Global AI Bootcamp, which is happening right now in Italy. So let me introduce myself more briefly on the next slide. As you can see, I'm a developer advocate for Apache APISIX. We'll talk about shortly in the next few slides. It's about OpenAI Gateway and API Management Solution. Of course, you can always reach out to me if you have any additional questions regarding my session. I will be always happy to jump into a call, make a coffee break, online coffee break nowadays. I'm based in Tallinn in Estonia. So let's get started with this plan. I have a very interesting agenda for today. We'll first talk about what is an API gateway and what's the API management solution. And then I will introduce specifically what's the Apache APISIX and what you can get the benefit of using this kind of API gateway together with OpenAI API to build scalable, secure, performance AI solution. And then I will show you also several API gateway plugins that can you can use these plugins to enhance OpenAI API capabilities, and you will learn how to create this new upstream route, which is a very basics of API gateways to connect your existing let's say system or APIs with OpenAI API with a confidence. So, and then also shortly I will demo at the end how to configure these primary edge functionalities for OpenAI API, and you will understand first what's the primary edge functionalities and how it's important in our life. So with that plan, let's get started. So APIs, just 3 letters, right? Acronym for application programming interface. By now, we are all familiar with this term because we are living in increasingly API-centric world. Because every service we use today either uses APIs or is an API itself. Just leave your comments if nobody, maybe anybody knows about APIs. If you don't know, just give me some short, I can explain more about that. Because every service uses APIs nowadays, even ChatGPT uses APIs. Also, you can see it can collect and retrieve all the AI models generated by OpenAI API. You can collect these AI models response from REST APIs. That's how ChatGPT interacts with REST API, and there is always something need to improve regarding APIs also. And because we know that the success of your AI application or AI service depends on the integrity, performance, and availability of your APIs. Here, another question comes in, like how to achieve these 3 indicators of success, as you can see on the screen, to build successful applications. One of the solutions can be by using API gateways, right? Because nowadays, we are building multiple microservices to build a particular product. It means we have consuming applications. They are consuming some kind of functionality from more than one service. It can be microservice, or nowadays we are building serverless APIs by using some Lambda or Azure functions or something else. But in the reality, you can also use some other AI models and deploy these AI models and publish them as Azure functions or Lambda functions that you can run based on the request. And in this flow, as you can see, API Gateway serves as a central point to route all incoming requests to the intended destinations, right? Intended destination can be any upstream API server or third-party service, database, maybe serverless APIs that I mentioned earlier. And in other words, it accesses a very sync layer between your user clients. It can be maybe a web application, a mobile application, desktop application, and your backend services. That's whatever in your backend, like application server, OpenAI API. So, this is about API Gateway. Once we have the idea that API Gateway can sit in the middle of all the requests, you can also put some additional components into API Gateway, and plus we call it plugins, right? They are herd mechanism. You can put these plugins to build more advanced API Gateway solutions. Let's say currently, if you take APISIX, there are 50, maybe more than 50 built-in plugins that are broken down into several categories, as you can see, like authentication, security, traffic control, and more, to meet the basic common scenarios in the modern technology systems like a distributed architecture or something else. So now you can ask me, like, Babur, you start to talk about AI and API Gateway and how, what is the APISIX in this case? Like, why you are introducing APISIX from the beginning? Because it is one of the fastest growing top projects of Apache Software Foundation. Maybe you know already world's largest software foundation like Apache. Maybe you are already part of this community. We have Apache Kafka, right? Cassandra, Tomcat, one of the famous the open source projects. You can also count APISIX, also this kind of community project, which is open source. You can use them, and it provides all the features listed on the slide. And one of the cool features that I love it because we are very kind of developers who would like to develop something our own, right? It means this built-in plugin sometimes will be not enough to meet all the business requirements. So you need to write your own plugin. So it means you need to know a specific programming language, technology, or tool. In this case, you don't have to worry about. You can use your favorite programming language you're familiar with. If you're a Java developer, Python, Go, or JavaScript, doesn't matter. You can create your own plugin to build something new and use this plugin for the traffic control. Another feature that I like, it's for low code. For those who doesn't like to write the code, you can just use the existing plugins and create a new plugins by composing or orchestrating one or multiple plugins together on a drawing board. That's why there's a UI dashboard. So it means you can just put some conditions and specify some flow. You can generate new plugin from existing plugins. So it's also one of the cool features that I like. And now if we jump back to the initial topic, what is the OpenAI API? You can also go to the website and check it out. OpenAI API, basically similar to other APIs, it enables some of the features and resources over API. In this case, it enables powerful AI models for us, for developers, maybe for data scientists, or whoever you are. You can also use these AI models by accessing APIs. For example, you can generate a text. It can complete some text generation. Also, you can generate some code. By using these APIs, there is a special endpoints. Even you can generate some images, like let's say images from existing text as an input. You can provide some text. It will generate an image for you as a response. Or maybe you can just upload or send over REST API one image, and it can generate this variation of this image with multiple options. That's cool, right? And there's not it's not all the features I'm showing on the slide. There are many features. You can check it out. It's quite many options you can face with OpenAI API. And now we can talk about like what is the benefit in this case. Okay, OpenAI API can provide some AI models features. And APISIX can act as an API gateway in the middle. So here I list out some of the common benefits that are some of the companies, organizations they are using. Let's say by using API Gateway together with OpenAI API, you can build like a scalable, secure, high-performance APIs that can interact with OpenAI API without worrying about security, observability, where you can monitor all the traffic by enabling logs, metrics, and traces. You can control what kind of requests coming to OpenAI API. Also, you can improve the performance because you can enable in the middle caching, where OpenAI API responses can be cached to improve the performance and reduce the latency, right? It's one of the great features. I love that. And then also this scalability means as API Gateway independent component, you can scale it up or down. You can create many instances of the same API Gateway or many instances of the same OpenAI API application you have. Also, here you can see the several plugins currently already available. You don't have to create these plugins, write any code, or make any architectural change. You can use plugins such as rate limiting, for example. As the name suggests, it can put a limit on the number of requests coming to your OpenAI API by rejecting specific requests if there are too many requests coming from specific API consumer or application. You can also filter out them by location. It's a powerful feature where you can enable also monetization, API monetization. You can also put some maybe plans for your monetization of your APIs. Let's say a free plan you can have also some other pay-as-you-go plan and so on. You can also put some authentication on the top of that unauthorized users cannot access your APIs, or maybe you can do some transformation. Let's assume that OpenAI API always responds to you with HTTP JSON format. You can convert this JSON format to something else that your system uses, maybe XML, or maybe you have also other services that are talking to each other with gRPC protocol. You can convert REST protocol to gRPC protocol. In this scenario, it's quite useful. Also, one of the great features that I can think of is you can create multiple API consumers and can use the same API key for the OpenAI API that I'm going to show you in my demo soon. Just keep in mind these are the existing plugins, and you may have more. So now I can shortly explain what the demo is about on this slide. As you can see on the left side, I have some client applications. We call sometimes API consumers, right? They can be web servers, browser application, like maybe Chrome, or let's say Edge or other browsers, maybe mobile application or desktop application. They are trying to access your service, and you are providing some kind of service. Let's say when user gives a product name, your system provides product description. For example, if you give the input like please write me short description for Apple 14 Pro, and your system, your API should respond with a whole description. What is the Apple 13 Pro as a response to this request? In this case, as you can see, API Gateway we put to the center that first faces this kind of requests. It means you can always customize a path, URI path, and your domain. Let's say you have a domain, my website domain.com, any domain you have that you are providing service and exposing to the world. And in this case, it can fetch these requests and it can route to responsible service. First job, what API Gateway can do, it can route your request based on the path. If it should go to /v1/completion endpoint of OpenAI API, maybe to other endpoints, like endpoints for maybe image generation or so on. Next thing, you can manage your API consumers. You can specify some of the API consumers on the API Gateway level, but again, like without any writing any code. And also you can set some authentication. Currently, OpenAI API only provides authentication through the API key, where you can just put API key on the authorization header, and then you can connect OpenAI API. But you can also enable some single sign-on with API Gateway. Let's say you can enable single sign-on with Microsoft, Google, Facebook, and whatever third-party service provider you have. The next one, of course, as I mentioned, the rate limiting, powerful feature, and caching the response. So our task will be in this demo to create this product description endpoint that redirects the request to the actual OpenAI API completion endpoint and collects this information from AI and responds back. But we will, in the middle, we'll manage everything: authentication, routing requests, API consumers. We will enable some rate limiting and caching. Of course, if you prefer to read more about this feature, there's also blog post. If you prefer to read the written format, that is also available. I will leave out in the chat the link. You can read it out. Now we can switch to demo session. So let me switch to demo. So as you can see, I have a demo prepared already, and I published it on my GitHub repository. You can find it on the APISIX OpenAI API report, and there are some useful things. You can see this is an API Gateway application with a set of the projects. Let's say etct. Etct is a database that the API Gateway uses and saves all the configuration files, or Prometheus integration where you can monitor your API usage with Prometheus. And also there are Docker Compose. I mean, we are using Docker to build some images and run the containers that you can simply run this application with one curl command, or let's say one Docker Compose command, sorry. And now if you just git and clone this project, and you can open this project in your favorite editor. It might be VS Code or IntelliJ. It depends on your favorite one. If you navigate to Command SH, I also prepared some of all the examples for curl commands that we are going to use today. Of course, if you prefer not a command line interface, you can use Postman. You can use Insomnia to do the same calls. It's very straightforward. First thing we need to do, of course, we'll do on the right side, as you can see, we did Docker Compose app to run all the necessary containers. In my case, I'm using Windows operating system and Docker desktop installed on my machine. As you can see, all the necessary containers now up and running. Next job we need to do, we should go to OpenAIAPI.com and create our first account. In my case, I have already created one account. And next thing, you need to generate API key to access these OpenAI API models. So it is just a secret to give you a secure access to use these models. In my case, I have already generated my secret key, and now assume that you have already one up to now. You can just pause the demo and go and generate this API key. Then, of course, you can also refer to documentation to how to authenticate to this API, to learn how to use completion endpoint, how to use code completion endpoint, and some other endpoints for your knowledge. But today we are going to use only the completion endpoint. Well, you can use image endpoint as well. Let's switch back to now our the command line examples. As you can see, I have my API key already is here, and I'm trying to now run a curl command. It's a typical request that we send to OpenAI API. This example I took from Getting Started guide. As you can see, it's calling completion endpoint with the post request, and we are trying to let's say test the connection if we are able to get some response from OpenAI API. Just saying, say this is a test, and the OpenAI API should respond to us as, okay, this is actually the test you are sending out. And we are providing authorization bearer token and also the JSON object in the curl command. So if I just copy and pass this curl command into terminal and press enter to run this command, as you can see, I have a response come back from OpenAI API with a correct credential with my API key. As you can see, this is actually saying, indeed, this is a test. Now your connection is ready, and now you can build something new on the top of existing solutions. Next, until now, we assume that we don't have any API gateway, right? We did very direct connection to OpenAI API without any API gateway. Now we will add and introduce API gateway in the middle. It means our server, let's assume, deployed to somewhere in the cloud, maybe on your server, on-premise server, and then we have slash OpenAI slash product description endpoint. Now the task is to send the same request to get some product description for a specific product through this API endpoint, but this API endpoint should serve on our server, not through the OpenAI API. But under the hood, it will call this API slash completion and gets a response. This is a typical example. In the second curl command, as you can see, it is forwarding. It will forward all the requests to the completion endpoint. So to achieve this kind of proxy solution, we need to do a few things. I need to first create upstream. Upstream means backend servers. In our case, who is a backend server? OpenAI API, right? And we need to specify and say to API Gateway, okay, I am going to create OpenAI API upstream by using round robin algorithm. Means just by default how it should route your requests based on which algorithm. We can just maybe skip the algorithm as well. And we are using HTTPS scheme for making a secure connection with OpenAI API. And we are managing all this work with admin API of Apache APISIX. We are creating upstream object with this simple curl command by saying, okay, this is my backend server with a single node. And single node means we can create multiple nodes as well to improve scalability. If I press and run this command, of course, as you saw, like it's responding me successful. Next step, I need to create a new plugin. Now, plugin means just additional component, right? Plugin's job, what it does, we call it, let's say, as a proxy rewrite plugin. It rewrites my requests data. Let's say if my domain was initially OpenAI API, it will rewrite this domain to api.openai.com, and similarly, it rewrites the URI to actual API endpoint. And also, as you can see, I am appending to the headers the same way as we did typical requests to OpenAI API. On the top, this similar request, we are just converting it to now API Gateway approach. Here we go. Now it will should route this request to the OpenAI API. And now I need to create this plugin and register, of course. Without registering, there is no plugin enabled. If you try to run, API Gateway says, okay, now I registered plugin config. Next, please create a route. The last step. We have 3 steps, right? We create upstream, plugin, and now we create the completion endpoint route. Of course, we register by unique ID this upstream and plugin config, and we will say, hey, okay, this is OpenAI completion route, which routes all post requests that match this URI / OpenAI / product description. It should forward to upstream service, and in the middle it should use this plugin. That's how this configuration looks like, right? It should use upstream and it should use proxy rewrite. And also, this is a proxy rewrite I'm just referencing to. If you also copy this command and put it into the terminal, if you run it, as you can see, I got another successful response. Means I have everything is ready now to test. Upstream, plugin, and also route. And now I can do the same request to OpenAI / product description, curl command, and now this request to retrieve the product description should forward to OpenAI API, but from my local host. In my case, I'm using my own local server, but of course you can always use somewhere a public domain and register first public domain and deploy this API Gateway solution together with your services as a next step, right? It's more a next level when we have proof of concept is ready, and then we are publishing to use this our service for our users. And now it's time to test if my API gateway able to route this request to the OpenAI API. It takes some time because it generates quite long text. I mentioned that it should maximum tokens for OpenAI model 256, so that's why it returns 256 letters with a description, as you can see. It describes what's the Apple Sorting Pro. You can replace Apple Sorting Pro, whatever you would like to get from OpenAI. So this is how the routing works, right? Now we were able to route all incoming requests to the intended destination. It means OpenAI API. Now we have this routing is working, but you may notice that these calls to /OpenAI API product description is still publicly available, and it's open for everyone to use. This is not secure, right? Especially some kind of malicious attacks can happen always. And now your task is to secure somewhat the request that's coming to API gateway. Even if we have very secure way of communication between API gateway and OpenAI API by using API key, but there is no secure way for the request that's coming from your client, right? That's why I will try to now use some kind of authentication approach. We have many authentication approaches, right? Basic, JWT, or using maybe OpenID Connect and so on. Now I'm using just for demo purposes a basic authentication, which is I am creating one consumer for my API. As our first consumer, our first user who is going to pay for our product service with some credentials, like I give username and password. The next step, I will say to API gateway, okay, now please also enable this basic authentication plugins so that nobody else except consumer number one can access my API. So if I run the next Carol command to update my plugin configuration, so it means basic authentication, it's our second plugin, right? First one was proxy rewrite. That was routing our requests. Now, if you try to, again, request the same endpoint exposed by API gateway without any credentials, let's say username or password, you will definitely get some unauthorized error. It means we already somewhat secured our connection to API gateway, and we got an unauthorization error like a HTTP 401. So it means everything is working as we expected, right? What if we now provide correct access credentials like username, password? We should get the response as it was in the past, like a successful response with a product description, because we have API consumer. API consumer has own credentials and can access and use the same API key under the hood that we generated from OpenAI API. So this actually future creates another use case. You can create multiple API consumers now for your API gateway, but these multiple consumers can use the same API key, like an organization or a consumer group. You can split this API key usage into one or multiple consumers. So now is everything good. Second step, when you are evolving your new API, you need to implement also some security features, right? Authentication features. We have security features like rate limiting to limit number of requests, let's say, for unauthorized users, maybe for authorized users, but with some kind of limitation. Let's say our user can request only 2 times within 60 seconds our APIs. Otherwise, it should throw exception. Okay, you are requesting too frequently. Please try again. Or maybe if you are doing API monetization, please pay more to get more access. So in this case, rate limiting can help us with easy steps, like we can do, again, append our third plugin called limit count, and then it will create for us these rate limiting features, applies the policies, like every 60 seconds we can do 2 requests. Let's test it. The same request we will send, but with consumer number one credentials. If you try to run the first time the request, it will success because we have allowed to do one more request again. As you can see on the response header, we have rate limiting is coming, like how many limits we have. We had 2, and we after 2 times calls we got this error message, like a forbidden error. So we are limited on the number of calls. What I'm referring to is the header, as you can see in the response. Like you can also specify rate limiting and export this rate limiting data to maybe third-party API monetization tool for billing, for invoicing, so your users start to pay for your new very funny application, I call it product description, that provides some product description. But you can, of course, build the complex stuff from there. For the demo case, you can ask me like what plugins you use to bubble. Like, okay, once again, we are reviewing now. I used authentication plugin and the transformation plugin, and also the one more rate limiting plugin. The one we start first, we start with responsive write, right, which redefines all the request or header information, and then we use the limit count plugin. You can find this plugin documentation on APISIX website. And then we also enabled one of the authentication plugins called Basic, very basic approach. Of course, you can see some other plugins available here. So, and next we use it. You can use like observability plugins to observe more your APIs. Let me also now switch back to my own terminal in a moment. I can show you some of the features, let's say about observability, how you can see the metrics and logs that we have done so far. So let me switch to my screen. And record just a moment. In the real time, you can see some of the metrics. So now, now you can see my screen, and then I will go to my containers. It's the beginning, as I said. Sorry, we use the Docker Compose to run some of the containers, right? And we had other containers we didn't introduce, like we have. With this example coming Grafana, which is a very powerful tool to see your logs. The metrics also exposed by Prometheus. Also, you can use APISIX dashboard. Let me open the Grafana. It's up and running on my local host. If I open this and make it bigger, as you can see, there is a Grafana dashboard. And if you navigate Apache APISIX, you can, after you generate, of course, some of the data will be available here. How it is interacting with OpenAI API. Now we don't have any data because up till now the demo prepared already I recached it, but you can always point to the API Grafana dashboard and see this data is being incoming. Let's say requests per second, how many requests are failing, how many requests were successful, and so on. It's very good for testing your observability. Or the same way, you can open the Prometheus plugin, and Prometheus is also running on the local host 1990, and you can also see here some of the graphs after you use this demo and go step by step. It will generate some of the data logs and metrics for you. Next, last feature I would like to show you here is a dashboard. Once again, because during the demo I used only Carl, and I said you can use also Postman. And you can also use a dashboard to do the same work we did up to now. Let me first log in to this dashboard. It's also a community dashboard. It's for free to use. You can of course, set some of the login passwords, and then open this dashboard. As you can see, I have this route and upstream. This is a upstream I created through the curl command. But if you prefer to use UI dashboard, you can also create the same using the dashboard. And you can specify the upstream name. You can specify the host name as OpenAI API, right? Or any host name you have for your AI models, and then switch back to upstream. It will create this upstream for you. Or the same way you can create a route from the dashboard. The same route I created in the demo is available here under OpenAI product description. If you open this, as you can see, the same description and the same name for the route is here, and the passes and so on. And even if you'd like to enable some plugin configuration and define some API backend server without creating upstream, you can do also on the configuration of a route. Let me show you here plugin configuration. Let's see. Instead of you using the curl command, you can also enable these plugins from the dashboard. What I mean, for example, what kind of plugin we enable at first, like a basic authentication, right here. You can also enable this basic authentication plugin just by clicking a couple of buttons, and it will create for you the plugin basic authentication. Or maybe you can set some traffic control plugins like limit count, as we created also limit count plugin up to now, right? And so on. And another feature, as I mentioned, like you can do the same plugins configuration flow. Maybe for your OpenAI API, you would like to use 3 plugins together, right? As we use it, like at the beginning, we have basic authentication facing if consumer has access to use our service, and then we enable the like a limit count plugin to enable rate limiting policies, and after that we had also one more plugin to, let's say, observe some logs, metrics, and traces. If you enable some observability plugins, you can specify here in the plugin orchestration in this flow, and then you will able to see on the Prometheus and Grafana dashboard all the logs and metrics and traces. So with that, my demo is close to end. I can stop my sharing and switch back to my slide in a moment. So that's the moment. Here we go. Now, again, like in the after the demo, we have some takeaways for today, like how we can use API management solution such as Apache APISIX and OpenAI API to build some scalable APIs and secure and high performance. In this demo, we used APISIX, but it's not about APISIX. You can also choose any open source project available in the market, maybe enterprise solutions. For example, the Azure itself also, if your service is hosting in Azure, you can use API management that Azure provides. It provides similar features that open source has, but you need to pay a little bit for usage of API management. Or as a takeaway, you can also learn some of the API Gateway basics, because API Gateway basics is always the same. Whatever API Gateway provider you're using, you need to have a knowledge on concepts like upstream, route, plugin, right? And for example, you need to know how to install these plugins with easy steps, like we installed the plugins from security to rate limiting, right? Or the plugins like observability can also enable. And in the next, let's say, the link I provided on the blog post, there is also example for caching. That's we missed it today in the demo. For caching also, you can try to yourself, like how you can cache API responses so that our API, we don't have to always request OpenAI API. Always you can have a cached response to improve the speed of collecting, retrieving AI models. And also one of the good things we learned as a takeaway, we were able to manage our API consumer, right? as a first step to API monetization. So this is a useful stuff you can take as a takeaway for today. And I'm also leaving out all the necessary references, useful links for your review. Please reach out to me if you have any questions or ask me in the chat. I will be more than happy to answer all your questions and maybe provide more complex examples for your learning. Thank you.